Now, another common expression of anger is when people put on an angry countenance and go stony silent. The person that responds this way generally uses their silence and angry moodiness to punish whoever they're upset with. And again, it's not healthy for a marriage relationship. If you anger quickly and forgive slowly, you will be a hard person to live with. And maybe you don't break the TV remote by throwing it against the wall, but you get upset and there it is on your face, and you are going to punish your husband until you think he's had enough, or you're going to punish your wife until you think she's had enough, and you're going to be stony silent, and it's going to be walking on eggshells around the house to be with you. If you anger easily and forgive slowly, you are a difficult person to live with. Make it a point of earnest prayer to get a handle on your anger, because if you don't master it, it will master you. And it'll not just affect your marriage relationship, it'll affect every other meaningful relationship that you have in life. And don't blame it on being Irish. You can get a handle on your anger. All right, the next commandment, God said, you shall not commit adultery. That was in verse 14. With God, of course, that's when we put other things before Him. God calls that spiritual adultery. And obviously in a marriage, you would be hard-pressed to imagine anything more damaging than unfaithfulness. Be faithful to your wife. Be faithful to your husband, not just in action, but be faithful in your thought life as well. And again, Jesus expounded on that in Matthew chapter 5, and I quote to you, you've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks on a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. A lustful, exploitive disposition has no place at all in a marriage relationship. Love gives, lust takes. Love serves, lust demands. Love nourishes, lust chokes. Sex is good. In marriage, God created it, should be enjoyed. It is a God-given gift, but lust has no place even in the marriage bed. Now, as we said before, God doesn't close His eyes when you make love to your husband or wife. He's not going like, could you please hurry up? I'd really like to come and bless you, but just come on. Now, God created sex. Sex is good. And sex is holy. But when it goes outside of its bounds, it becomes harmful. Electricity is good. Can warm your house, can cook your food, can bring light in the room. But when it's used improperly, it can kill you. And this sexual desire that God has put inside of us within the confines of marriage in the right way, it's wonderful. But you get it outside of that, and it can be quite damaging. Now, I just want to give you quickly 3 thoughts to affair-proof your marriage. 3 thoughts to affair-proof your marriage. Communication, companionship, and closeness with God. Number 1, there needs to be affirming communication. If you're going to affair-proof your marriage, there needs to be affirming communication. Look with me, if you would, in the Song of Solomon. We've got Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then the Song of Solomon, written, of course, by Solomon. And this book deals with some of the wonders of intimate physical love between a husband and wife. And as much as you want to get an analogy of Christ and the church out of it, and it is there, I'm sure, to some degree, more than anything else, it just deals with physical intimacy and emotional intimacy in marriage. And we come to chapter 7. I want you to look there with me. We could go all over the book and find what we're going to look at in chapter 7, but I think this is just a prime example of affirming communication. Here Solomon is talking to his young Shulamite bride, and this is what he says to her. How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a skillful workman. Your navel is a rounded goblet, it lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. And yes, that was a compliment. Your breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower, your eyes like the pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon. Again, a compliment, surely, which looks towards Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. A king is held captive by your tresses. How fair and how pleasant you are, O love, with your delights. And I want you to notice, Solomon is complimenting her body, which was very important in her case, because in chapter 1, it's very evident that this was an area of insecurity for her. As she's sharing in chapter 1, she says, don't look on me because I'm dark. She'd been tanned from working out in the vineyard. She was a simple country girl, and she felt insecure when compared to the fair-skinned, pampered ladies of the court. And Solomon very wisely builds her up where she felt most insecure. But instead of doing that, many times a husband will tear his wife down brick by brick in areas that she feels insecure, or the wife will tear her husband down brick by brick in areas where he feels insecure, rather than building them up. I'll let you in on a little secret. And by the way, the Shulamite does the same thing, not only when she's talking to him, but when her friends say, what is it about this guy? Tell us about him. And she goes on and speaks these affirming words about him. Ladies, here's a little secret. Us men, we're just little boys in big bodies. And it's very, very important for us to be admired. Okay? When we strut, tell us we're great. We need to hear that. And some of you guys, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can remember back, any of you played Little League or played Pop Warner football or anything like that? Maybe played soccer as a kid? If your dad was ever involved in those things, I'll guarantee you there's not just a handful, a bunch of men in here that'll remember back after you had some good game and your dad came up and said, hey, well done. Man, you pitched a great game, son. Or that was an awesome hit you got. I can still remember things back when I was in Little League 40 years ago that my father said to me. I remember he came out to one of my track meets one day when I was running in track. I was in junior high school. And I didn't even win the race. I was running the 1320. I didn't even win. And Dad came up to me afterwards and says, you know what? I watched you run. He says, I don't think you could have run that any better than you ran it. I still remember. I was 13. That was a major thing for me. There's something in us we need to be affirmed. In fact, if you read where it's all boiled down in Ephesians chapter 5, it says, husbands, love your wives. Women more than anything else want to be loved. And it said, wives, respect your husbands. More than anything else, men want to be respected. The Amplified Bible says, respect him and admire him exceedingly. We need to be affirmed. Husbands and wives need to affirm one another. And if a husband is starved for affirming conversation, or if a wife is starved for affirming conversation, it opens the door of temptation. Mark this place, if you would, and look back with me in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 5. Numerous times in the book of Proverbs, it talks about unfaithfulness in marriage and the consequences of adultery. But as well as doing that, again and again and again, the writer in Proverbs tells us how adulterous relationships begin. Proverbs 5, and look with me at verse 3 if you would. For the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she's bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. In the end, it'll be bitter. In the end, you're going to be wounded. That's how it ends, but how does it start? It starts with someone's lips that drip honey and whose mouth, meaning their speech, is smoother than oil. It starts with talk. Look in chapter 6 with me, if you would. Verse 23. For the commandment is a lamp and the law a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of a seductress. Then it goes on after it and it talks about an adulteress preying on the precious life and the results of someone that can get us involved in an immoral relationship. But it starts with flattery. Now we know flattery is not sincere, but if you have not been affirmed by your marriage partner, you're going to be starved for it. And there's something in us that just gravitates towards affirming words, even if deep down inside we know it's just flattery. Look in chapter 7 with me, if you would. Verse 4. Say of wisdom, you're my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. Look in verse 21. With her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. Now, we know it works both ways. Husbands, listen to me. If you are not building up your wife, the devil will try and send somebody else to do it. It may be some guy at work. All he has to do is say, you are awesome. That sticks with a lady. All it takes, if a husband's being starved for it, is for some woman to say, you know what? Man, that was brilliant. Where do you get these ideas? Man, you look good. You work out. You stay pretty fit. That sticks in a guy's head. She thinks I look good. My wife never says that. And see, the devil will prey upon that and try and get a whole thing spinning in a person's head. Now, that does not justify someone that's fallen into an immoral relationship. No. But it helps explain how that can happen. If you're going to affair-proof your marriage, there must be affirming conversation. It is so important. All right, the second thing. Affirming conversation. Number 2 is companionship. Unhurried time together. Look back with me, if you would, in Song of Solomon. There needs to be companionship, unhurried time together. We touched on that when we looked at the commandment about the Sabbath. God saying, I want exclusive, extravagant time with you. Now here, Solomon, and catch the flow of this thing. He's been complimenting his bride. He's been speaking affirming words to her. And look at her response in verse 10. I'm my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. He really loves me. And she goes on. Look at verse 11. Come, my beloved, let's go forth to the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let's go get a hotel. That's what she's saying. Let's go spend some time together. Well, dear, what are we going to do there? Glad you asked. Verse 12, let us get up early to the vineyards. Let's see if the vine is budded, whether the grape blossoms are open, and the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes give off a fragrance, and at our gates are pleasant fruits, all manner new and old, which I've laid up for you, my beloved. Now, in the Bible, in the Scriptures, mandrakes, the only other place that it's mentioned anywhere in the Bible is in connection with sex. They were thought to be an aphrodisiac. And what she's saying here, he has been building her up and affirming her, and she's suggesting, let's go spend some time together. Let's go lodge in the villages. Let's go get a condo out in Palm Springs. And let's spend a few days, and there I'm going to give you my love. Let's go on a little love holiday. And then she says something interesting. She said, we're going to bring forth fruits, all manner new and old, that I've laid up for you. She put a lot of thought into this. And she's basically saying, listen, this is not going to be predictable, my dear. This is not going to be stale and boring. I got some old things for you, and I've got some new things for you. We're going to invest in our relationship. We're going to have some unhurried time together. There needs to be companionship. And then the third thing is closeness with God. If you're going to affair-proof your marriage, draw close to God. When Potiphar's wife tempted Joseph to sleep with her, his response was, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He was too close to God to do it. He didn't want to harm his relationship with God. So to affair-proof our marriages, affirming communication, companionship or unhurried time together, and closeness with God. All right, the next commandment, and you don't need to turn back to Exodus, was you shall not steal. Very, very important. Be a person of integrity. Someone that's always cheating or cutting corners, it'll be hard for your spouse to respect you because they know what you're really like. Your uprightness should make your husband feel proud. Your uprightness should make your wife feel proud. I read a story one time, broke my heart, because it was about a preacher. His 2 boys wanted a dog, and he hadn't gotten him one, and one day a stray dog turned up at the door. they sort of adopted the dog. The boys loved it. The whole family loved it. It was just sort of a perfect fit, like the dog that was meant to be theirs. But about a week or maybe 2 weeks later, he gets a call from a stranger. Says, I heard y'all picked up a stray dog. My dog ran away, a couple of weeks ago, and this is what it looked like. He described the dog, and it was exactly like the dog that had come to their house. Well, the preacher, not wanting to, disappoint his sons and have to give the dog away, said, well, there's a lot of dogs that look like this. There's no proof that it's actually your dog. And the guy said, well, actually there is. He says, if you look on his tail, he has this coal black tail. There's 3 very coarse white hairs in the middle of the tail. You can't miss them. There's just 3 big, thick white hairs. He looks at it, sure enough, there's those 3 white hairs. Well, the guy's going to come over to collect his dog. And what Daddy did is he got a pair of tweezers and pulled all 3 of those hairs out. The guy gets there and, oh, it's my dog. He says, wait a minute, you said there was 3 white hairs on the tail. Better look. There's no white hairs there. The guy went away without his dog. And in the man's statement, he said, I think he had 3 sons. He said, that day we gained a dog, but I lost 3 boys for Christ. His sons saw that Daddy had no integrity. They thought, well, if he lies about this, maybe he lies about everything else. If he's willing to steal this man's dog, maybe this other stuff he's saying isn't true. We need to be people of integrity. Your spouse and your family should be the first ones to testify about your uprightness and your integrity. It really does affect a marriage, my friend. All right, commandment number 9. Don't bear false witness. In other words, be truthful. Don't lie. Don't be malicious. If someone would lie about their neighbor for whatever reason, they're liable to lie about anything. That kind of person won't make a good marriage partner. Honesty and truth are at the heart of a good marriage. Unfortunately, over the years, I have been called upon sometimes in a situation within the our own flock or outside of it, where someone has told lies in order to protect themselves. They've jeopardized other people's jobs and positions to protect their own thing and actually lied about someone else to cover their own wrongdoing. And I've had to step in a number of times and said, you know what? A person that would do that, shouldn't be working in your organization or shouldn't be working here, or whatever it might be. Really hard to have a marriage relationship with someone that will lie to protect themselves. There was a guy who was in an automobile accident and he wasn't hurt, but thought, I'm going to get some money out of this. And so he feigned an injury to his shoulder and to his arm. And, he went after this poor lady that had accidentally hit his car and, just said, oh, she's hurt my arm and I need all this money for pain and suffering and, I've just done so much damage. And so, the attorney, for the insurance company goes before the guy and says, well, how high can you lift your arm since the accident? And he goes, that's all the higher I can lift it. Just like that. He says, well, how high could you lift it before the accident? He says, I could lift it that high. Just like that. Obviously, he lost the case. But you know what? If you'll find someone that will lie for personal gain or to cover their own rear end and let somebody else, go down the tubes for them, they will not make a good marriage partner. And then finally, number 10. The 10th commandment was, you shall not covet. Don't be discontented with what you have. Don't make what you don't have the focus of your life. Accentuate what you do have. And accentuate what God has given you and what God has given your spouse and celebrate that. Learn to appreciate your wife's strengths. Learn to appreciate your husband's giftings rather than focusing on what he doesn't have and what he's not gifted with. Now, I'm not everything, and I can't do everything. I look at my wife's brothers. She's a farm girl from central Wisconsin, and her brothers can make anything or fix anything. I'm glad she doesn't compare me with them. The tractor breaks down, they can fix the tractor. They can fix cars. They can work on cars. Her brother Earl just recently built a house from the ground up. I'm not real mechanical. That's not my forte. I'm sure I could learn if I applied myself, but I have no desire to learn how to work on a car. I'm going to let somebody else work on my car. That doesn't do anything for me. But there are other areas that I have a bent towards. There are things that I do love. I like to write. I like to teach. I like to find out about other cultures. I want to eat your food, and I want to find out about your history. And there's just some areas that I'm gifted in and some things I like to do, but there's some things I'm not. If you're looking for a Mr. Fix-It that wants to go to the drag races when they're in town, I'm not your boy. I'm glad Janet didn't want a Mr. Fix-It when she got married. And sometimes we tend to look at everything that our husband doesn't have, and we compare him with somebody else, and it's like we begin to God says, hey, be satisfied. Be content with what you have. A friend of mine wrote a song. It's brilliant. Talking about your wife. Says, she may not be everything you want, but she's everything you need. That's a good line. He may not be everything you want, but he's everything you need. And if you'll help encourage him in the giftings that he has and celebrate those things rather than concentrate on everything he's not or everything she's not, you'll be a whole lot happier. And if the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence, try watering your own grass. If you hop the fence, you're going to find out it may be AstroTurf anyway, and it's just not green grass like you thought it was. Now, these commandments that we talked about tonight, I think in a very literal sense, God was speaking out of a love relationship with his people and said, look, if we're going to have this relationship, these things need to be in place and functioning. Now, I don't know if the statistics are true. I hope they're not. But I've got a book upstairs that's, done all of this, polling and different things, and it's actually a book on youth, but it talks about how many teenagers come from broken homes. And I was shocked. In the book, said that more than 50% of Christian marriages end in divorce. Oh, that hurts. Maybe you've been through 3 divorces. Just don't let it happen again. Let's make what we have work. Let's sow into the relationships we do have. And if you're single and want to be married, hooray for you. I reckon God's got somebody for you. Don't get frustrated. And don't fall into the trap thinking, well, if I just find Mr. Right, or if I just find this person, then I will be whole. Or if I just find this perfect girl, then she's going to make me whole. No. It takes 2 whole people to make a good relationship. If you think, his dysfunction is going to cancel out your dysfunction, you're in for a rude awakening. What you're going to have is double the dysfunction. Right now you have this great opportunity to concentrate on Jesus and give your all to him and making yourself that right person. And if you'll concentrate on doing that, I believe God will bring that person into your life that you can glorify God through your marriage with. And if you're married right now and going through a struggle, and some folks never suspect. Sometimes we put on our good happy face when we come to church and we're going through hell at home and we think, I gotta put on my game face, not let anybody know that, I'm in a storm or that my marriage is in trouble, so I'm going to smile and say, praise the Lord, doing great. Oh, how you doing? Wonderful. Everything's great. And it's not true. And get some help. Begin to apply things. And don't you fall into the trap of thinking, well, my husband just needs to change. Or my wife just needs to change. The only one in your marriage you can change is you. You can't change them. You make the decision that you're going to be the conduit through which God can flow into that relationship. And when God has a channel to come in, things can begin to turn around. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes if you would? And I'm just asking you to do that.